I could probably crash that party.
You could get out of
All right, so
I'll
tonight,
come over to the house tomorrow night, so.
So tonight will be the last class that you'll have me as a teacher for this round. So,
It's all downhill from here.
and like every other class, we didn't complete our study, our workbook. I'm surprised at that, right?
It's tradition.
Right. Yeah, can't get away from tradition now. Tony set the standard, so you got to go by the standard.
I just don't tell you what we're studying, so that way you don't know.
You don't ever know whether you completed it or not, huh? All right, so tonight we're going to pick back up where we left off from our lesson, and it won't be the lesson from last week because if you remember, I mentioned that we were a little out of sequence with Jesus walking on the water, and I tried to stay in chronological order, and for some reason I got out of order in the workbook, and that was the lesson I told you we were going to do, so we did that lesson. So now we're going to have to step back and backtrack just a little bit and review again the choosing of the 12 apostles, and then Jesus sending them out, and then we'll get to our lesson of Jesus feeding the 5,000.
I thought I'd done the wrong one.
I try to keep Terry on his toes over here. So back 3 weeks ago, we talked about how Jesus had went to the mountain to pray, and he stayed there all night praying. And when morning came, and his disciples, that he called his disciples to come to him, and he chose 12 of the disciples to be his apostles. And we mentioned that Peter was first to be called an apostle. And he also chose Andrew, his brother, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Philip from Bethsaida, his friend Nathanael, Bartholomew, the Israelite in whom there is no guile, Matthew, Levi, the tax collector, Thomas, James the Less, the son of Alphaeus, and Judas, also known as Levacius or Thaddeus, and then Simon the Zealot, and of course Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed Jesus. And these were the ones that he called to be his apostles. And what did we say an apostle was? I know we've been over this several times.
Messenger.
A messenger, one sent out. And then we read in Acts the requirements to be an apostle. So what did Jesus require for anyone to be called an apostle?
I had to have been with him.
Right. So they had to accompany the others.
Witness the resurrection.
Right. Accompanied the other disciples with Jesus, spanning from the time that Jesus was going in and out among them, and beginning from the time that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist until his ascension into heaven. And also he had to be a witness of his resurrection. And then not long after this, Jesus sent his 12 apostles out and to proclaim the kingdom of heaven and to perform miracles. And what power did Jesus give to them, his apostles that he sent out?
Heal the sick and
Right.
cast out demons.
Heal the sick, cast out demons, and he gave them authority over unclean spirits. And where did Jesus tell his apostles to go when he sent them out?
The lost house of Israel.
Right. So to the Jews, the lost house of Israel, and as we mentioned a few weeks ago, these were members of the flock, right? These were already people that had fallen away and were lost sheep of Israel. and among the Israelites. And where did Jesus tell them not to go?
Samaria.
Right, so he told them not to go among the Gentiles and to go into no town or village of the Samaritans. And Jesus tells them to take no food and no bag and no money. And do you recall what Jesus told them what they could take on their journey?
Staff.
A staff.
Sandals too.
Yeah, they could wear the sandals that were on their feet, and they could also wear one tunic or outer garment, but they weren't to take two, but just one, and a staff, as we mentioned. And Jesus sends them out, and he tells them to find a place to stay, and if the house where they would stay is found to be worthy, what were they told to do?
Men of peace. To the house.
Yeah, so he told them to stay there and until their journey is in that town, and also to give them a blessing and bless the house. But if the house wasn't found worthy and they didn't receive them or their message, what did Jesus tell the apostles to do?
Shake the dust off your feet.
Right, so shake the dust off their feet and let their peace return to them. All right. And Jesus warned those that were not received them and not received their message. And what did he say to those who wouldn't listen? What was his warning?
Wouldn't do it.
That they wouldn't be tolerated, right?
Right.
That Sodom and Gomorrah would be more tolerated than those from that town on the day of judgment than the ones that wouldn't receive their message. So then after this, the apostles returned to tell Jesus what they had done, and he took them to a desolate place. And here they rested for a while, and they were going to take time to eat, right? So that's gets us to our lesson tonight of the feeding of the 5,000. So let's turn to Matthew chapter 14, 13 to 21, and we'll read. Matthew 14, 13 to 21. And we'll start over here with John.
When Jesus heard of it, he departed by ship in a desert place apart. And when the people had heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick.
And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into villages and buy them victuals. But Jesus said unto them, They need not depart, give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes.
He said to them, Bring them to me. Then he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking upon the heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the least to the disciples. And the disciples gave to the multitude. So they all ate and were filled, and they took the 12 baskets full of fragments that remained. Now these who had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children.
All right, so let's go to the parallel count in Mark 6, 30 through 48. Mark 6, 30 through 48.
The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then because of so many people were coming and going, that
answered and said to them, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? But he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish.
And he commanded them to make them all sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in ranks in hundreds and in fifties. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. So they all ate and were filled. And they took up the 12 baskets full of fragments of the fish. And now those who had eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men.
All right. Now let's go to Luke, chapter 9, verse 10 through 22. Luke 9, 10 through 22.
On their return, the apostles told him all they had done, and he took them and withdrew apart to a town called Bethsaida. When the crowds learned it, they followed him, and he welcomed them and spoke to them the kingdom of God and cured those who had need of healing. And the day began to wear away, and 12 came and said to him, send the crowd away to go into the surrounding villages and countryside to find lodging and get provisions, for we are here in the desolate place.
He said unto them, give ye them to eat, and they said, we have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes, except we should go and buy meat for all the people. Well, they were about 5,000 men, and he said to his disciples, make them to sit down by 50s in a company.
15.
Oh,
Already.
And they did so and made them all sit down. Then he took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes and looked up to heaven, blessed them and brake, and gave to the disciples to set before the multitude. And they did eat and were all filled. And there was taken up fragments that remained to them, 12 baskets.
All right. Now we'll go to John 6, 1 through 15.
After these things, Jesus went over to the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. Then a great multitude followed him, because they saw his signs which he performed on those who were diseased. And when Jesus went up the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. Now when the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near, then Jesus lifted up his eyes, seeing a great multitude coming to him, and he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread, that these may eat?
He asked this only to test them, for he had already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, it would take more than half of a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. There is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?
And Jesus said, make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fishes as much as they would. When they were filled, he said unto his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost.
Therefore they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world.
Okay. So this is the only miracle that's recorded in all 4 Gospels. And the time here is the Passover was near, and Jesus had sent out his 12 apostles, and they have returned to him from being sent out, and they were telling Jesus all the things that they encountered as they went among the lost sheep of Israel. But also, it was a time when Jesus was learning of the death of John the Baptist, right? And Jesus tells his apostles to come with him and let's go to a desolate or a deserted place and let's get some rest and eat. And then as they were going away, what does Jesus encounter here?
Great multitude.
A great multitude, a great crowd of people had gathered and was following them. And Mark even recorded that they were running ahead of them. So they were in a boat on the sea, crossing the Sea of Galilee, and the people, the crowd, the multitude was on foot on the shore. So how did the crowd know who they were that was in the boat with Jesus, and that knew who Jesus was? How did they know who it was?
Probably by hearsay.
Some of them probably didn't follow him for a while.
Right. So the text reads that they recognized them because they had seen the signs that Jesus was performing and doing on the sick, of healing the sick. And when Jesus and his apostles had went and came upon the shore, and Jesus seen the great crowd, he had compassion on them. So what did Jesus do for the people since he had compassion?
Healed them.
Healed them, and then he also fed them, right? And Mark records that he had compassion on them. And why did Jesus have compassion on the crowd of the people?
Like a sheep with no shepherd.
Right. So Jesus seen the people and noticed that they were like sheep without a shepherd. Now evening had come, and his disciples came and told him that it was getting late and that he should send them away so they can find lodging and food and have time to get something to eat. And what does Jesus tell his disciples in response to them telling him to send them away?
You give them
To
something
feed them.
to eat.
Right. So he's telling them, says you feed the crowd, you give them something to eat. And his disciples responded in saying that we have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless we go and we buy food for all these people. So they were saying that they were unable to feed them. And how many were there?
5,000 men plus women plus children.
Right, so 5,000 men, not including women and children, so possibly up to 25,000 people. And Jesus responds with a question to Philip, and what does he ask Philip?
Should buy bread.
Right, says where are we going to go buy bread? This is Jesus' response, because the apostles said, that we don't have enough to go feed them, and he says, well, where are we going to go buy the bread so these people may eat? But Jesus already knew what he was going to do, right? He knew the solution. He knew what he would do, but he had asked the question to Philip, so he tested him. And Philip responded by saying that 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each to get a little. Now, a denarii was a day's wage, right? So 200 days' wage, it'd be a lot of money, right? It would be 2/3 of your yearly salary. And in the parable of the unforgiven servant, the servant was brought to the king, and he owed 10,000 talents, which was 20 years' wages. So we're not just talking about 2/3 wages, but 20 years' wages. And the master forgave him, right? And forgave him of his debt. And, but the servant, he had a debt that was owed to him, right? And he went to the other servant and requested of him to pay him 100 denarii. So we're talking a lot less money, right? All right. So Jesus asked how many loaves you have, and Andrew responds with 5 loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many? So basically, that's not going to feed all these people, right? So Jesus tells his disciples to have the people sit down in the grass in groups of 50 and hundreds, and then he blesses the loaves and broke them, and he handed them to the disciples, and the disciples handed them out to the people. And did everyone eat that was in the crowd? So everyone ate
Is it filled?
till they were filled, right? And we said there was how many? 5,000. Plus women and children. So, and then how many fragments were gathered? Right. So the leftovers were 12 baskets, and then Jesus went away to a mountain and withdrew because he perceived that they were coming to take him and make him king. And then Jesus dismissed the crowd, and the disciples got in the boat and went to the other side. And then that's when he left and went to the mountain. Okay? All right, let's go to our questions now. Not sure where we left off.
I think I read it.
Okay. So we're at Terry.
Number 1,
Number 1.
when the apostles returned to Jesus, he took them to a deserted place to rest.
Right, so he took them to a deserted or a desolate place to rest, and also to eat, right? Because they had not yet eaten.
Right.
Because the crowds were coming into them, and they had just returned from their mission, going out into the lost sheep. And so the apostles were sent out to the lost sheep of Israel. All right, number 2.
Jesus and his apostles went by boat across the Sea of Galilee, or Tiberias, to Bethsaida.
Right. So why were they seeking a desolate place?
See it?
Just need to get away from the crowd.
Right. So they needed to rest, they needed to eat, and to get away from the crowd. All right, number 3.
When the multitude came, he had compassion on them and healed them.
Right. So he sees their need, he feels compassion on them, and he heals the sick of the people.
But it also say that he taught them to.
Right. So that's what I was going to just fix and ask. What else did Jesus do? No, you're good. While he was with the crowd gathered, and like Terry mentioned, he taught many things. And what did he teach them?
The kingdom of God.
Right. So the kingdom of God is at hand, right? All right. Number 4.
I come up with several different things there, but I settled on one. Jesus
Okay.
told the disciples to feed the people.
Right. That's what I had. Jesus, Jesus told the disciples to feed the people. And how did the disciples suggest that they feed the people?
Don't buy bread.
Right. So they suggested that they go buy bread. And what was Jesus' response?
Feed them.
Right. But he also said, well, we're going to buy bread, right?
Yeah.
That much bread.
That much bread, right. I would imagine that it would probably be kind of hard to find 25,000 turkeys in Simpson County. If you were told to go get 25,000 turkeys, it'd be probably something to come up, hard to come up with, even here at Thanksgiving.
How do you picture the crowd? How do you picture this multitude? Are they calm, or they just be quiet? People gotta,
They were probably grumbling, right?
yeah, a lot.
Grumbling that they were hungry and, all right. And, again, this is a desolate place, so there was nowhere for them to even go buy bread, right? Right,
And you drink out of 5,000, one kid brings his lunch.
right. Yep,
Can you imagine what they thought after they had eaten?
right, yeah. That was a miracle, right? All right, number 5.
Andrew, Simon's brother, found a lad with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish.
All right, so 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Do you think he wanted to give them up?
Not if
See?
you realize he was the only one out of 25,000 that brought anything to eat.
Right. He brought his food, right? And nobody else was there with food.
You probably didn't flash it around either, did you?
Oh, he probably had it hid, right? Maybe.
I don't know why he doesn't eat.
He might have scarfed down one before it got to him.
Yeah, I've been 3 fish.
Right. All right, let's go to our true and false. Number 6.
Peter said, where are we to buy bread? False. Jesus asked, where are we to buy bread?
Right, so John 6:5, Jesus says this to Philip, that where are we to buy bread? All right, number 7.
The crowds gathered in groups of 50 and hundreds and sat in the grass.
Right, so this is true. And what do you think this would give the disciples? They were the ones that went out among the 25,000 or all the people, right? So it's probably hard to get around. So if Jesus had them in groups of 50 and 100, it'd be a lot easier for the disciples to walk among those and distribute the bread and the fish.
It'll take a long time just to feed them. They got fed.
Right,
And to separate them,
right.
either thing.
Now,
And-
would this most likely been that they fed the men first and then the women?
No, I'm not getting into that.
I mean, isn't that usually the men always ate first?
Probably so, yeah. I mean, that was the culture, right? And, that even was probably a little bit before my time. Well, I kind of remember it a little bit when I was growing up. We would get together for Christmas or Thanksgiving as a family, and the men would usually go first before the women and children. I barely remember that.
That's where I learned what the neck and the wing and back of the chicken was.
So they weren't leaving the white meat for you.
Oh,
Usually ain't much meat on that back either.
Right.
see how big I am.
And it's possible this also gave them opportunity to count the people, right? Because they knew specifically how many people were there, right? So it might have been a reason. All right, let's go to number 8.
After the crowd ate, they took up 20 baskets of fragments of loaves. False, it was 12.
Right, so that's false. It was 12 baskets that they gathered. And why did Jesus want the disciples to gather the remains?
So there wouldn't be nothing
Wasn't
wasted.
wasting that.
Right, didn't want anything to waste. All right,
That might have been breakfast the next morning.
it could have been. Now,
They didn't
the
take-
disciples hadn't ate yet, probably not.
Was that the time they didn't have anything on the boat?
It could have been. But it didn't list that the disciples ate. It said the 5,000 men ate, so there was a basket for each. There was 12 apostles, and then there was 12 fragments. So, and they had not ate yet, so it could have been for them to eat. All right. I think we're at number 9.
Jesus got in a boat and left after he dismissed the crowd. I'm pretty sure it's false and it's not true.
That's right.
That's actually one of your trick questions,
It is a trick question.
because it is true that they got in a boat, but it is not in the passages that you had listed at the top of the page.
Right.
Or is it not even in that order?
Right.
He got
So
in the
It's in
boat after he
Matthew.
heard about, John's death, wasn't it, or something like that?
well, Jesus went. He left after they dismissed the crowd. Well, first he dismissed the disciples, told them to get in a boat and to leave, and then he dismissed the crowds, and then he flees for his own life because they're seeking to make him king, right?
So he didn't get in a boat, did he?
No, he didn't get in the boat this time when he left after the feeding.
Because he walked them on the water.
Right. He went onto the mountain. And then, yes, the next story is that when he leaves the mountain, he comes to him and walks on the water, as we studied last week.
So what's the answer?
False.
The answer is false. Yep. So Jesus did not get in the boat after he dismissed the crowd, because he left because the crowd was after him to make him king, and he went back to the mountain. So, all right. Number 10.
Well, I thought I knew this one, but now I'm not sure. Everyone ate, including women and children. At first I thought it was true, but Mark says those who ate were 5,000 men, so.
Yeah, but who had the fish?
There's another account that says that everyone ate, so
But it doesn't
So it is true.
it's true.
Okay.
It says plus one.
That's what I had, but
I agree with you. True. All right. Number 11.
The people call Jesus the prophet, true.
All right. So this is in John 6 and verse 14. This is indeed a prophet who is come into the world. What else was the people calling Jesus?
Isaiah, John.
Elijah, and called him a prophet. All right. Now, multiple choice.
Jesus told his disciples, B and C, buy them something to eat and give them something to eat.
Anybody have anything different?
I just had C.
I just had to see, but
All right.
But that one,
he did.
he said, where are you gonna buy?
So the disciples told Jesus, we'll go down A through C here. The disciples told Jesus to send the crowds away, right? So the disciples come to Jesus and says it's getting late and they don't have time to eat if we don't send them away now. So the disciples are telling Jesus to send the people away so they can find lodging and food. Okay? So then who tells them to buy something to eat? It says the disciples that we have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish unless we go buy food for all these people. So the disciples here are talking to Jesus, and he's telling them that unless we go buy something for them to eat. So the answer that I had was C, that Jesus told his disciples to give them something to eat. And he said, later on in the conversation, after the disciples responded and said that unless we go buy something for these people to eat, Jesus then said, where are we to go? Because this is a desolate, deserted place, and where are we going to go and buy bread? All right. So this was an opportunity for Jesus to teach his apostles, right? And he was constantly training the 12 so that they may learn. And what did they learn from this? What practical lessons did they learn that they could apply to their ministry? And what can we learn that would apply to our life as being a better Christian, as a disciple of Christ, to better serve God? So think back through the story and let's identify a few things that Jesus taught his apostles and is also teaching us. Right? So physical needs are important. God will provide. Have faith that God will provide.
Compassion.
Compassion on people, right? So I had written down that every once in a while that we should isolate ourselves from the things of the world and spend time with Jesus. Like spend reading God's Word and meditating on the Word that He's given us in the Bible. And but also, if we see someone in need, that we should serve others, right? That we should put them before providing for ourselves, even eating, or in this case, leisure. You know, because Jesus was telling the disciples, let's go for a rest, but then the crowd comes, and then he takes that opportunity, right? He don't want to, you know, miss out on an opportunity to teach the people about his kingdom, right? And then, like Johnny mentioned, to have compassion for the people, and in this case, for those that may need physical or spiritual needs, right? So we should provide for those. Anything else?
Pray continually.
Pray. So we can also trust God too, right? That God can overcome obstacles as we serve. So we can have faith that He'll come through on His part, and He'll do what He needs to do if we do what we need to do. So if we act on our desires to serve others, then there's a need for God to provide also, right? And He will.
Yeah, that would have been an impossible thing to do. It wasn't like you had weeks to prepare for it. It was time to eat.
Right. And then He also gave a blessing on the food, right? So that's,
Yeah.
so we need to be thankful for the things that God gives us and to obey God. All right, so that concludes our lesson, and I'm thankful for the opportunity that I had. This was my first time teaching a class, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. I'm thankful for y'all and your participation and showing up and studying with us. And I pray that the class was beneficial for you. If you didn't learn anything new, maybe you at least was reminded of things that you already knew, and the things that Jesus did in His life and in the training of the 12 apostles. All right. I thank you, and happy Thanksgiving.
Good job.